We'll have Father Ted Vitali go first, and I'll just read a couple of things to you about Father Ted. One is something that the word is that he's a great pastor. So he wears many hats, as best I can tell, and he's a great pastor. He was a department chair for many years. Let's see, 17 plus 11, almost 29 years. And so just being fairly sympathetic to that in my own role, it's amazing that he's here today after that many years of being department chair. If you haven't read anything by him, one thing that I would recommend, I read it this morning, was a story that he tells. You'll tell me if I get this wrong, but there's an article written about him. It's called Father Theodore Vitali, The Ethics of a Priest in Camo. And I recommend it to you. He tells a story about a wolf that maybe
you got to leave me my story.
Yeah, that I hope he'll tell us this morning.
There goes my paper. I'll see y'all later.
So also of note is he is the professional ethicist for the Boone and Crockett Club, which, if you don't know much about the Boone and Crockett Club, you should look them up. They're a very interesting organization. So without further ado, I'm going to let Father Vitali talk to us for 30 minutes and 15 minutes for questions after.
All right, well, thank you. Let me stand up, okay? Is that all right? We cool? All right. These are my notes from this morning, all right? I didn't know what my audience was going to be, all right? The whole point of the talk is on hunting as a way into the numinous. The numinous means the holy. But I take it in a technical sense. It's what Rudolf Otto means by it. You know who Rudolf was, philosopher, anthropologist, okay? And it refers to the feeling, the experience of creatureliness, not only dependent, on Schleiermacher, the feeling of dependence upon the Creator. But this refers to more the feeling of being a creature to the Creator. And that the emphasis on the word creatureliness. Okay? So that's what I want to talk about. And let me say it this way, okay? Why do I want to tell you stories? Because I'm not going to argue a case. I'm not going to try to make an argument for it. And then you figure it out for yourself. And I'm influenced by a line, maybe bogus, but it's a line from A River Runs Through It, when Norman McLean is talking about he was a professor at the University of Chicago. And he's talking about his father was a Presbyterian minister. And the old man the minister says to his son, Norman, you like to tell stories, don't you? Yes, Father. Then tell the story of our family, and then you'll understand. The understanding comes from the telling. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you stories. They're true stories. Okay? And in the telling of the story, you'll either get the meaning or you won't. I can't convince you. All I can do is tell you. And in that sense, the telling of the story is a form of art. It's immediate. Either you get it or you don't. And it's not your fault if you don't. It means I didn't tell it well. You see that? It's all the Gospels are as true storytellers. They're great storytellers, inspired by God, but they're storytellers. You enter the story. That's what I'm going to take with me. This morning when I woke up, I was scared. I said, oh, man, I don't know. What am I going to do? Okay? I'm not going to argue the ethics of hunting. I already did that publishing on it. You want to read it? Fine, I'll tell you where you find it. I'm presupposing it's ethical. Okay? You can challenge me if you want. That's fine. That's not what I'm going to. I want to go beyond it. I'm going to go beyond the ethics, beyond morality, to spirituality. That's the move I'm making. Okay? I thought about it this morning. I remembered something. It's the key to it. I can't show you. I'll play it out for you. I remember it must be about 10 or 15 years ago. I was back home. I'm from Connecticut. I'm a Yankee from Connecticut, okay? And I went with my brother into the sun. It was around Christmas time, just before Christmas. And it was a beautiful late fall, early winter day in Connecticut. And we were in the middle of the state somewhere, Maryland and Wallingford, around that area. And we went to a hunting store. My brother was getting his bow or something like that. And I remember as I stood outside, I felt something. I felt what I felt as a boy when I was in the woods with my father as a kid hunting squirrels. And I wasn't remembering it. It's not like, gee, I can remember the old man. I never was in American before. It wasn't that. It wasn't there as where I hunted. It wasn't. But I was on the land. And that land embraced me. I didn't remember it. I was in it. It's more primal than memory. Memory's cognitive. This is not. It's pre and deeper than cognitivity. There was an immediate sense of being in the presence of the holy. The holy was the land itself. I was home. I haven't lived in that state in 60 years. 6-0. But I was home. I got reach. Got it. That's immediate. That's intimacy. That's the intimacy of a person to the land. That's Aldo Leopold's land. It's not just dirt or trees. It's a place of sacred value. You're in a sacrament. You're engaged in the sacrament of life itself. A life that's irreplaceable. You can't replace it. You can't replicate it. You're engaged in it. And I remembered that this morning as I remembered at that time. This is 15, 20 years ago. Where it is the feeling of being at home. And that is why there are primal places in your life in which you are immediately present. And it's a place where you emerge from. We are the dirt made reflective. We come from the dirt. And we return to the dirt. I know for myself, I want to be buried back in Connecticut. I want to go back to the earth out of which I came. I've spent almost my entire life in St. Louis. But I want to be buried in the soil out of which I evolved. I came. Kabish. Okay. That's true. As I reflect on this, that's just the opening line. That's the holiness of the land. That's the land ethic. It's the land spirituality. And hunting has a way in which it puts you into that, and I'll show it to you. It's a learning experience, but it's more than learning. It's not cognitive. I'll show it to you and I'll tell you stories, okay? Because I learned it because the land taught me. And the animals that I took taught me. They gave me their life, and I'm different for it, and grateful forever. That's the truth. Can't explain that to somebody. You cannot. All you can do is tell it. You can't prove it. You can't prove any example of your nuts, okay? I'm not nuts. I'm not nuts at all. I know what I'm saying is true. When I was a kid, like a lot of young boys, etc., there's machismo, okay? Grab the gun, you're watching the cowboy movies. But I remember when I, as a little boy, was shooting squirrels, big games for rabbits, okay? In Connecticut, they hadn't seen a deer in 100 years, okay? So when I moved to Maryland, after I was ordained, the first thing I did after ordination was bought a surf casting rod and a shotgun, followed by a 30-06 rifle. I found out there was land here. I dived into paradise. I was going to go hunting again. For whatever it's worth, it took me 7 years before I got a deer. And I hunted hard. Every chance I got to go out. On my outfit, the Order of the Passionists, we had 600 acres of land in central Missouri. Believe me, I hunted every minute of it, that I could humanly do it. In fact, I completed my dissertation on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Deer season was still open. I'm sitting in the office with my director, and he's telling me, "Oh, boy, this is good." And he says, "Come on." Jumped in my Volkswagen, drove my ass out there 60 miles. I ran up the tree, was pulling my pants on at the same time, my hunting things, and I'm staggering a tree. And here comes a crapping deer. I couldn't believe it. So finally, and I'm still hanging onto the tree. It's been 7 years of trying to, boom, I shoot him, down he goes. And I have to say, finally, he only had one antler. Hardly a trophy, okay? It was neat. I called home and said, "Pop, hey, Pop, guess what? What? I got a deer." No kidding. Hey, bravo for you. Good for you. Good for you. Oh, yeah. I also completed my dissertation. You asked me what I had more to hear about my lot more. This is my friend's dissertation, okay? A lot more. A lot more. I didn't put 7 years in to get the dissertation. I put in 4. That was a cheap date comparison. Let me say, at that time, it was a feeling of satisfaction completely, finally. And the next couple of years gradually took more year. But then I went out to Canada to go bear hunting. That's where this t-shirt, this sweatshirt comes from, Bill Ritchie, up in northern Ontario. Again, the average is, I guess every other year, maybe 50-50 chance getting one, not me. Took 5 years. When it took the 5th year, I finally got a bear, got a sow. And that was the opening night, and again, it was a feeling of complete satisfaction. Finally, it's over. Finally, I got one. I don't want to ever go back and get eaten by the flies anymore. If you know anything about northern Canada, forget about it. The flies are the most. If I want to torture somebody to death, that's exactly where I'm going to put it. Take his clothes off, make him walk around for a half hour. He'll sing like a canary. You don't have to waterboard anybody. You send him out there. He'll talk. I said, I'm never going back. I was stuck for the whole week. Okay. I said, now what am I going to do? For $25 you get another license. I said, no. So I asked Bill, the guy here, and I said to him, Bill, maybe I go out easy. Yeah, but I got to put you on the same bait. We hunt off the baits, okay? Okay. So I expect never to see another bear. If it took 5 years to get one shot, it's going to take me another 5 or 10 to get another. I'm sitting there, 9 o'clock at night, a little before dark. Here comes a bear. Comes out of the bush. He looks at me. He's got me because the gun's on my lap. That's looking at me. Now what do I do? Goes back in. He's got me. He sees me. He's about 100 yards away. He sees me. Comes over, looks again, goes back in. Like a clock. Keeps going. Finally comes out on a log and he's looking right at me. I have him in my sights now. But I can't get a clean shot. I won't do it. So he takes up, runs down the road, and that's over. And this is the important type of follows. Okay? All the rest is perpendicular. He walked right in front of me. Like a sucker shot. He walked right in front of me. I shot him. I killed him instantly. But when I went over to him, this was no feeling of satisfaction, and certainly not any pleasure. Anybody tell you got pleasure out of killing an animal? Okay? That is not the emotion you feel. You may feel satisfaction and completion. But the dominant feeling is a mix of regret, because you did kill a living animal. Okay? You did kill it. You killed the weapon. And then gratitude. And it's the overwhelming feeling of gratitude. I felt that animal gave me his life. And I remember kneeling down in that. And I thanked him. That's a true story. 1987, that's the story that showed me out there. They got rid of it. Okay? I was hunting. Bill died in 86. He died of a stroke in 1986. And his son Mark had a memorial hunt for him in 87. The spring of 87. I went on it. And it was opening night. I'll tell you what it's always to, okay? Am I okay? Okay. I was sitting, it was a rainy night, like it was yesterday here. The crappy was all hell. Terrible. And I'm sitting in a blind. I got rifles under my poncho. I'm trying to stay blind. And the bait is about 30, 40 yards from me. And I swear as God's my judge, something's behind me. Now, a bear will often get a nose full of you, and they'll start for you, and you walk in the blind with you, just don't move. It's not going to hurt you. He's just trying to figure out who you are, what you're doing. So I wanted to, if it's a bear, I might get a shot at him, okay? I'm not sitting here for love. And so I'm holding the rifle, and I'm trying to turn to see him. And as I turned, he was 7 steps from me. I walked it off. There's a wolf. It was from here to there. He was looking at me here, soaking wet. You see this thing here. I've never seen a wild beast. He looked at me. He walked over, and I'm watching him the whole time. This is exhilarating. It's not scary at all. It's intimate. It's a difference. Well, I'm afraid of him at all. I didn't want him to go away. And he walks up on an embankment and looks over at me, and I'm watching him the whole time. My rifle's still sitting on my lap. If he wanted me, it was all over with the song, okay? He was right behind me. I had no chance if he wanted to do me harm. He wanted nothing. He was probably just bothered by the scent getting in the way of what he wanted to do. But what he did was he accepted me. He accepted me as a creature among creatures. I wasn't alien to him in the sense of forbidding me, so you got to run from danger. He'd accepted me, and I can remember racing through my mind, there are no fences between us. There are no barriers. We are in a continuum. This is the continuum of life and death. And for that moment, I understood I was in there. That was the moment, that was that prophetic moment, epiphany for me. I knew who I was at that moment. The Lord gave it to me. Told me I was a creature among creatures. I had the difference. I could think it, he couldn't. But he gave it to me by accepting me in his world. And I understood what hunting was. Hunting is the exchange of life, the bear. The bear. In the continuum of life and death. And what the hunter does is directly engage that level. When you go to the grocery store, there's an infinite chasm between what you eat and what you decay. The hunter eliminates that. And what we do is we engage in it in a very, very human way. We are predators. We are by nature predators within the predational continuum. Directly or indirectly. For the hunter like himself, that is the primal experience that you gain from it. You know who you are. Now take it one step further. Is this okay? You ask me anything you want, okay? But just to take it one step further. I gave a retreat once to a bunch of sisters and nuns, and I told this story, and then they never invited me back. I was a goner. You think it's funny stuff for you, man. That ain't easy, okay? I know it's wacky. This is what I said, and this is going to sound bizarre to you. I felt Christ in that world. That was a religious experience for me, not just a human experience, where I felt the continuity of my life with the life of an animal and the life of the organism of life and death, the Good Friday of life. For me, that was Christ. You say, how can that be? I'm not a pantheist. Right. I take the incarnation seriously. When God becomes man, human, he becomes what Aldo Leopold says is a citizen of the universe. Just like you are, just like I am. And as a citizen of the universe, he is present within all the dynamisms of the universe. Christ is present everywhere. The incarnation is the radical transformation of the goodness of life and creation to the holy. It makes everything holy. Everything. Life and death. And everything within the universe becomes sacred. It becomes a sacrament of the divine presence. When you experience the world for what it is in its own intimacy, you're experiencing the presence of God, not as creator, but as Redeemer. Way more infinite than the Creator. You experience his flesh, which is the world. That's the truth. And you engage it in a very deep and profound way. You're in the intimacy of the exchange of Good Friday, of death from life, life from death. And you have no illusions about it. You live within that intimacy of Good Friday. I'll tell you one more story. There's a million in my head, but just one more. And that's Alaska. I've been up there 7 or 8 times to help out in the parish in North Pole, the place of the true Santa Claus, and if you're good, I'll give him a phone call. All right, know the guy. He looks like a guy from the parish, but we won't go into that, okay? It's in the center. It's right near Fairbanks. So you're in the interior. And a friend of mine, Tom Leibscher, member of Boone and Crockett, he was the chief park, he was the head of the Park Service there. So he used to go out. There is no night, in the summertime in Alaska. 20 hours or more of daylight. And the dark is hardly dark, okay? We'd go out after work and we'd go on the trails. He was scouting for moose, okay? Moose season was up. He had a cow track. So I would go along with him. And one time, the true story, one time we were going down this incline, this ridge, and it was the White Mountain Range. They had a major fire there about, I heard 11 million acres burnt over a 5-year period. They really liked the thing. Well, this was all new growth. So it's thick, you can't see too far. As we were coming down the slope, Tom slows down and he leaned back to look back at me and he said, "Do you smell that?" I don't smell anything. And he paused, and, "Oh yeah," he said, "there's a dead moose down." I remember saying this, he laughed at me to scorn. I said to him, is this cause for concern? He said, yes, there is cause for concern. And he took his rifle off his shoulder, and I took mine on mine. He said, there's probably a grizzly on it. And you couldn't see from here to that wall. Ah! I remember taking my rifle, scoping it down to open sights, if you know what it is, down to 0 or 1, so I could shoot with both eyes open. I slipped my safety as he did his. And I remember feeling, oh God, please don't let me miss, don't let me miss, don't let me miss, don't let me miss. And I wasn't worried about my life, it was Tom's. If the bear charges Tom, I've got to get him. If he charges me, Tom, I've got him, okay? And it's what I call primal fear. If the other experiences I had gave me the feeling of being a creaturely creature among creatures here in this incarnational world of Good Friday, got to pick all that together. Now I felt it as a prey. I knew what it was to have primal fear. It's not being scared. It's way more deeper and more fundamental than that. It isn't even dread. It's the fear of an animal who's about to be attacked, about to be killed. And I can remember as we walked down, the sense of presence, the alertness, every sense I had was on the alert. And I knew they would be 2 seconds, it could be there, right over the top of that, going after us. As it turned out to be nothing. And I think that might have been one of the most fundamental of my experiences, because that put me truly in the sense now of being, in Otto's terms, in the presence of the numinous, because I knew I was a creature who was a guest in the world of creatures. No better, this moment, no worse. I had intelligence, they had instinct. I could pray, they didn't. But we were in a continuum of life and death at that moment. And that's where I think hunting has such an incredible value. I don't see the other things that can help that. For me, and if I think for many hunters, the exchange of life, the gift of life, the animal gives its life. And you know it. If you're a hunter, you know you didn't take the life, you accepted it. It was given to you. You know that. You know that. You tough, experienced hunters, I'll tell you that. She gave her life to me. She gave it. He gave it. You can tell you that. 3 times I've lost a deer. What I shot at 3 times out of 40 years. All 3 times I talked myself into the shot. Shouldn't have shot. All 3, I got it. I killed him. Found him weeks later. Some places where I walked right by him. I walked right by him. She didn't give me her life. I took it. She didn't do it. I never did it again. So no more. If I know when to shoot. It wasn't that I was going to miss. Those animals did not give me their lives. I took it. And I was wrong. Okay? You know that intimacy. And that's the numinal law. That's the numinous. You're in the presence of the holy, creature among creatures. Life and death. The continuum of life and death. I'm sorry. Any questions?
Yeah, questions. We have plenty of time for them, about 20 minutes for questions.
We're not going to do it at the end, just after each
No, after each speaker, we're getting, 20 minutes here. We've got.
See?
You left them speechless.
Yeah.
They bored. They fell asleep. Darren's snoring over there. I could hear him.
Just a very brief follow-up. I haven't hunted big game like you have. I'm more of a bird hunter, but I was out in Yellowstone 2 weeks ago in the Tetons, and I had a hike the first day in the Tetons, and talked to the guy at the car rental place, and I kept talking about a hike I've done before out there where I could see a lot of moose and elk, and I knew I wasn't going to have time to do all of it. So another park ranger suggested, doing the shorter hike, which I did. But the guy at the rental car place just kept talking to me. He said, "You really need bear spray." So I grew up, going to the Smokies in East Tennessee, and black bears are one thing, but talking about grizzlies, it's like, all right, I'll take the bear spray. And so just a very small, nothing like what you experienced, but I was by myself on the path. I had about a 4-mile hike, ended at the summit in a snowstorm, which was gorgeous on October the 11th. But I've never felt so exposed in my life. because there was a grizzly bear track in the snow on the side of the trail, and I'm singing as they told us to, every minute or two, and clapping, and I'm singing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" a lot, and incorporating the bears into that song. And I never saw one, but I know I have a glimmer of what you're talking about, because I felt like I could be prey, felt like I could be attacked, but you also never feel so alive, right?
That's the whole point. It's interesting, for anybody's word, bear spray is pretty much useless. It really is. There's stuff for grizzlies, it's good for 30 feet. But there's too many stories where the bear spray doesn't work. It's just, when you get in trouble, if you get in trouble with a sow with cubs, the cubs are cute, they're like puppies. They're curious, and they'll come up to you. All right? They may weigh 70, 80 pounds, but mama's over there weighing 400, and she's not going to tolerate anything you do. You have no chance. The spray wouldn't do anything. That's, in a way, is the dilemmas of the natural community. You have to play by her rules. They're not pets. The biggest danger to the wilderness, the wildlife, in my view, are the voyeurs. People go out there just to look. I'm not taking away from it, but you have to be willing to engage it. And if you're not willing to engage it, stay out. Because you're risking creating a situation which the wildness of that animal is diminished in the sense that it's normal fears. That's what they tell you. Make noise. When you're walking, guys from my university were going up to the Yellowstone. I said, make a lot of noise when you're walking so that the bear is not alerted, is not surprised by you. That's when he's going to take you apart. But if he hears you coming, he doesn't want to waste his calories on you. He's not going to waste it. He's an efficient killer. He's going to kill to get the most amount of protein with the least amount of energy. That's what he's going to do. If you warn him, he sees you as an adversary or something that's going to be, he's going to walk away from you. He's going to avoid you. You surprise him, it isn't food. He's counterattacking you for protection. You've had it. He's going to kill you. If you see the movie The Revenant, that's a horrible scene when that bear goes after DiCaprio. It's a terrible scene, but that's a sow with a cub. It's this flash, you see the cub. That guy's a dead man. And that sow would not give up until she killed him. She goes back to him a second time. That's what happens. Anyway, that's Good Friday for you. Yeah. I would never go into bear country without carrying a gun, whatever that's worth to you. Don't do it unless you're with a crowd. If you're with 2 or 3 people, you're fine. If you go in by yourself, you're not fine. Carry a gun, preferably a shotgun.
That's what bothered me, because I flew and I couldn't take any guns with me, and I felt utterly defenseless.
I wouldn't have gone out, to tell you the truth. Any questions or anything? Any objections?
I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on hunting that is basically purely for trophy? Is this numinous feeling that you have described? Do you agree? Do you think that this is available in that kind of situation as well?
I'd say very rarely. Very, very rarely. Yeah, I'm going to make a distinction, okay? If you mean like trophy hunting, you're going to go out and shoot an elephant, okay? I got offered a chance one time to go to Africa to hunt. And I turned it down. Why? I have no relationship with the animal to the land. It's just nothing to me. You hunt the land of which you are a citizen. And so there's a commonality. To go outside of that to another land, to me, it's got too big a separation. I have no connection to it. And to go just for the getting of the head, no, that's terrible. That's abominable. There is a chance, though. 2 years ago, there's a guy up in northern Alaska, Bob Summers, he is a big outfitter. He's a member of our parish up there, St. Nick's. And he said if he had room, he would take me on a grizzly hunt. I'd like to hunt one time in my life, to hunt for a grizzly, okay? Because I want that ultimate challenge. Before I'm so old that I can't handle it. It turned out I didn't get to do it. That would be, in a sense, not a trophy. I want to throw this sucker on a wall. It's a trophy in the sense that I want to maximize all my skill to the highest level I'm capable of. Whether I shoot the thing and pull the trigger is another question. But it is the adventure of the pursuit. I want to give it everything I've got, okay? In that sense, it's a trophy, but it's a trophy not in a sense of something I can throw on the wall and brag about. It's nothing like that. It's that I have achieved something, an excellence in myself and in a sense of completion. I'll make a distinction. Why can't you do that with a camera? Camera is an art form, absolutely legit. Hunting is a predatory act. The world changes when you pull that trigger. When you go like this, very little changes. When you go like this, the world changes. You've killed something. And it's the predatory part that, to my mind, is for me sacred. Could be for the artist too, but is her way. This is my way. I want to engage that. I want to see the grizzly. I want to be on his turf, her turf, precisely. I'll give you one more example, right? This is years ago. I was at a conference in '92. This got me into this stuff, by the way. It was on ethics. And they showed a film, and in the film it showed this guy. It was here in Texas, of all things, I'll be honest with you, okay? A guy goes into a game farm, and he shoots a tiger or a leopard. There was a tiger, I remember the stripes. Okay, he shoots a tiger. And it was Wayne Pizzelli, animal rights guy, big-time animal rights guy, who's sitting next to me, and he said to me, "What do you think of that?" I said, "Well, he's not hunting. He killed an animal. He's not hunting." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "There's no relationship between the lion or the tiger and the land. That's not hunting. That's killing. Maybe good reason for it, but that's not hunting. Hunting is when you engage on the land in the terms of the land." Can I be honest with you? I don't want to offend anybody here. I mean, Texans, there's a lot of game ranches here in the state. In my view, they're very, very questionable. Morally questionable. Why? There's no relationship between the land, two things, the land and the animal you're hunting. So you got an antelope from Africa. What the hell's he got to do with this land? Nothing. Okay? Neither historically nor right now. And then the second thing is you're taking a hell of a risk on the ecosystem, because you're introducing genes. You're introducing potential parasites and all the rest. I had a lot of trouble with it. You want to shoot a leopard? Go to Africa. You want to shoot an antelope? Go to Africa. You want to shoot something here? Shoot an elk, a whitetail, a blacktail, a muley, whatever is indigenous to the land, so that you're engaging the land as such. That's the truth. Yes.
You mentioned that you started out with small game and squirrels in the woods, and I guess that's where I'd be at myself. But what would you know, other than the progression of your skill, which you mentioned, like grizzly hunting could be sort of a pinnacle experience based on the skill you've accrued through the years, but what would you see in terms of the progression of the game you've hunted as that playing into the power of the sense of creatureliness?
That's a good question. That's a great question. It's hard for me to answer that. I have to say I never got that from small game hunting, okay? But what I did get was a great feeling for the land. That's why it came back to me when I was with my brother, and then it wasn't just memory, it was an immediate experience of the land, okay? And it came to me this morning when I was thinking about this thing. I think in this regard, with big game hunting, you establish a very immediate bond with that animal. That animal is large like you are, and there's an immediate sense that you're killing it. When a rabbit is running, or a squirrel is on a tree, I'm not trying to minimize the value of the animal's life, okay? Or a bird. I'm a bird hunter too. I had dogs, okay? It's remote. It's too quick. But when you're sitting in a blind, or you're hunting a bear, or you're hunting a deer, it's a large animal that can relate to you, and so there's an immediacy of that experience. And you grow into it. Once you know it, you'll understand it, and the impact on it is large. When you take a large animal, you experience the life of that animal. In a way, it's more than flesh. I didn't say it well today. I stunk it up, but it's really the experience of soul for soul. I'm an incarnationalist. I take it really seriously. I take incarnation dead seriously. The world is a sacrament. The whole world is a sacrament. And everything is vivified. Everything's alive. Even the rocks have value, more than cognitive value, more than what I place a value on it. There is something sacred about it. When I go home to Connecticut, and I took a friend of mine, Sarah, to the beach, where I grew up as a little boy, okay? And I said, Sarah, I want to walk in the sand with you. Why? For old time's sake? But she had nothing to do with that. I wanted to feel the sand in my feet. Why? That sand's the same sand I walked on 50, 60 years ago. You see, there's an immediacy to that. The land is sacred. Believe me, it's sacred. And you treated it. When I was guiding, the 2 years I guided for bears up in Ontario, we did everything in our power not to affect anything in the environment. We wouldn't cut a tree down to clean the shot. We trimmed it. We would make sure that we left it as primal as we could leave it. That was especially Bill's son, Lark, who was very, very conscientious, was super conscientious, meticulously so. We left the land as we found it. That's the truth. You learn to love the land, and not like a farmer, maybe he does too, but he sees it as a source of produce. You learn to reverence the land because it's sacred, it's holy. It's the truth. And you kill an animal, you'll see it. There's an affection there. There's a love you have for the animal. My house is full of these things, okay? I got heads all over the wall. They're not trophies. Christmas trees, there's not one of them would make a Boone and Crockett even an accident record, okay? There's nothing. Little fawns, I got not fawns, does, spike buck, okay? But I did do this. I'll tell you, I got a few minutes, I'll show it to you. I'll tell you a true story. The bear, when I shot that first bear, I was so determined after 5 years of sheer frustration and bug bites that I mounted her walking with her mouth closed. I didn't want her to look ferocious. She wasn't. She's going to eat. I intercepted her on her way to a meal, okay? And so she sits right by my chair. So the bear's snout is right here, okay? And I reverence her. And then the deer heads are on the wall, and the other bear heads are downstairs in different places, okay? But one of the things, when I was in Alaska, I so loved the land. I wish I could go back. I got canned, but new pastor didn't want me anymore. I think he thought I was ugly. I don't know, but I got clipped. He didn't invite me back. Well, he's a new guy, he wouldn't invite me. Whatever. But I miss Alaska. And what I did when I was in Alaska, aside the times I went out with Tom and all the others, I began to want, I bought pelts. I first started with a wolf pelt. I was in a restaurant, there's a freaking pelt hanging from my head, okay? I said, what's it? It's a wolf pelt. So I went to the raw fur company in Fairbanks. They're top-run people. They're unbelievable. So I bought this wolf pelt. And I asked the taxidermist in St. Louis, can you mount this thing here walking? Because it said live mount, which means walking. He said, I can do it. So I gave it to him. It cost me 1,000 bananas, okay, for the pelt. It cost 3,000 to mount him, 2,000 to mount him. That little sucker's expensive. And I have him standing there looking at the bear. And then each year I got one more. I got a lynx, a wolverine, and then a bear, another deer, wolf rug. I made a rug out of it. And a taxidermist there gave me a black bear rug. If you're in my house, you have to send this thing. If you're in my home, it's like a hunting gallery. No matter where you go, you're going to see it, okay? But what you're going to see is every animal there is revered. Nobody F's around with it. Nobody puts a hat on them. Nobody F's around with them. Get it? I dropped the big F-bomb, but I'm afraid it would be scandalous. Okay? It's the fucking truth. Okay? It's the truth. You know what baleen is? It's a whale tooth. Okay? That's there on the wall. When you're in my room, in my home, you're in the presence of the animals whose lives I've taken in the land, the Alaska land. You're as much in Alaska as if you were in Alaska. And that's the whole point of it. The whole point of it. It's not fake, it's sacramental. It's a sacrament. Those animals are sacraments. They make present the land, the Alaska land, and all its holiness, all its violence, its power. That's a true story. Yeah. And it's, yes. Oh my God. All right. What do you want?
Father's wearing his Claire's today, so I can't pick on him too bad. No. I just want to thank you because this mindset of appreciating the sacred what if all the hunters, my family included from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, had this mindset that it wasn't a sport, that when they went out they were encountering the sacred, they were encountering God. It would be revolutionary, I just think, on the level of having that sort of a dialogue within that community, and I thank you for presenting it, and I hope that it spreads, and I would like to bring that message back to my family. I have a question for you on encountering the sacred, two things. I don't know if I'll be able to articulate it well, but I think you'll get me. When we are encountering the sacred, why is not encountering it enough? Why do we have to kill it? And on top of that would be our belief in Jesus coming, and I love the redemptive qualities that you're talking about. I'm curious if you think that Jesus' sacrifice of himself and his shedding of his blood is enough, and that maybe that he came so that we don't have to do that anymore, we don't have to shed blood. And as a priest, I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
It's a good question. I was worried about that question actually this morning. No, I really was. Guy Lanny, I knew you were going to be here, and I don't know how to answer it completely. I think this, though. The incarnation and redemption doesn't remove us from the continuum of life and death. And the hunter chooses to enter that directly as opposed to indirectly, and makes that choice to kill or not. And having made that choice, it's dialectical, because the animal must also give his or her life to you. And you choose that. I don't know where I am anymore. I have no question about morally or spiritually. I believe I'm right, okay? I hope I'm right. I know I am, actually, okay? Without bragging. No, I'm not just telling you, existential, experiential. It's hard to argue with experience. But I don't know if I can squeeze that shot anymore. I don't know. I'll tell you on November 10th. Because if I can't, I won't. I won't force the shot. I won't do it. And I don't know. I don't feel that lure as strongly now as I did. I noticed that with a lot of older hunters. And it's precisely to want to kill anymore. And I'm getting more so I don't want to kill. I don't want to do it. Even though I have no problem with the act of killing, it's me doing it at this point. Maybe I feel that the land is saying now, no more. And if it's the land that says it, I'll know it. I will know it. My experience of hunting, if I doubt and have to question, I can't shoot. That's what I did with those does, and that's why I didn't get them. They didn't give them to me. When I know to shoot, I shoot. It's up and at 'em, bang, I'm right there. It's instinctive, ram, I'm right on it, okay? And I'm not hesitating, it's not that at all. It's wham. If I see myself, it's over. Goodbye, make babies. I'll show you fishing, okay? We've got 2 minutes here. Fishing, okay? I do a lot of bass fishing. I have a bass boat and all that song and dance, okay? And you could say, do you get it out of fishing? The answer to that to me is no. And I'll tell you why. It's too artificial. Way too artificial. Because I don't consume the fish. I catch and release, okay? In his state, he's famous for great fishing here, catch and release. That's me, okay? Run around my bass boat, fish all day, okay? Release it all. Last year, I caught the biggest smallie in Bull Shoals Lake on the Arkansas board that I ever caught. And I put her in my live well. I said, this is going on the wall. This is a beauty, okay? But I took her out to take her to the cabin, okay? She looked at me. And he was big. It was a beauty. It was the best I ever did. And I threw in the water and said, I go make babies. Couldn't do it anymore. And enough's enough. Enough's enough. I've known hunters that turn to art. They turn to photography then. The only difference I would say, if I were in any dangerous area like you were, have gun will and camera will carry. I'll carry the gun with me because even if I'm functioning as an artist or as a hiker, I am still in that continuum. And I have a deep obligation to myself not to get killed. Or if I'm with somebody, to protect their life. And you've got to be ready. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
he modified, before he said story, he said, I want to tell you a true story. That's when you know you're listening to a hunter, because you have to modify the story with true story. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Michael Foley. He is a professor here in the Great Text Department, patristics professor, and a friend. Has written several books. Let me read a couple of the titles to you, so maybe you'll pick one of these up. Drinking with the Saints was published in 2015, and The Politically Incorrect Guide to Christianity, published last year. If you want something a little quicker that Michael has written recently, I would turn you to an essay, I guess you would call it, the Jim Foley Option. A very thoughtful, helpful in many ways essay. So, without further ado, I will let Michael take the floor for the next 30 minutes and then we'll questions.
Thank you very much. Unlike Father Ted, I am not a preacher. I'm a teacher, so I'm going to hide behind my desk. So I'll remain seated. And the title of my talk is Christian Stewardship and the Practice of Hunting. And it has three basic parts. One is to make the argument that hunting is now a part of responsible management of the land, that it is good environmentalism. And this will be mostly just sort of a statistical list that I will throw out for your consideration. But the second and third parts are the parts that actually interest me more, which is the Christian attitude towards hunting. And I don't think I'll be saying anything different than what Father has just said, although in far less eloquent terms. But that's the part that we'll be looking at the most. Is it, what are the ethics involved in hunting, and what are the potential dangers to a hunter's soul? Is the sort of the third part that I'm interested in. And I'm interested in this on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Father is an experienced hunter. I am a very inexperienced hunter. I've just gotten into it a little bit since having moved to Texas. And I have far, far more failures than successes. So I'm sort of, in some respects, I still feel like an outsider looking in. I can see the power of the numinous, but I still don't fully get it. And so I'm just kind of thinking out loud about some of these things this morning. But let me start with the case for conservation. And it's a very interesting argument, which I was unaware of even 6 months ago. And it's basically this. Hunting in the 19th century was part of the problem when it came to our management or stewardship of the land. But in the 21st century, it is part of the solution. In the 19th century, hunting in the United States was just kind of running amok. And that was due to a number of different causes. There was just basically a lot of ignorance and naive optimism. The North American continent was just so incredibly teeming with wildlife that there was just a sense that we can just keep shooting and we'll never deplenish our sources. And of course, that wasn't true. Another big cause was something that's now more or less mostly prohibited in the United States, which is market hunting. So instead of trophy hunting, you would hunt deer and then sell it to the market. This was a very popular way to make money, but of course you can see how that kind of profit instinct would quickly diminish sources or resources. And then the third cause was the anti-Indian policies of the federal government. That you may have heard the sort of stereotypes of buffalo hunters, that have this magnificent animal that the Native Americans would make total use of, and then the white hunter would come in, just shoot the buffalo and just take the tongue. And this was a sign of just extravagant depredation and waste. The reason why they took the tongue is that they would then go to a government official and get a bounty on the buffalo. The federal government encouraged the hunting of buffalo in order to deprive the Comanche of their primary food source, so that they would be forced to move on to the reservation that the federal government wanted them to move on. So it wasn't a lack of respect for the ecology, it was racism. Don't you feel better now? So once they got over these 19th century habits, the situation started to radically change in the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt, John Audubon were both avid hunters, and they were the first to see the importance of conservation. They established national parks. And today, through a variety of different causes, increased and intelligent hunting regulations about what you can hunt, what quality, the kind, hunting licenses, hunters' education courses, all of these things have radically changed the landscape, where hunters are now part of the solution. Just to give you a few examples of this, each year in the United States, hunters send $300 million to state conservation programs through surtaxes on the equipment they buy. And that is not including the hundreds of millions of dollars that conservation programs make through hunting licenses. So hikers, mountain bikers, bird watchers are able to enjoy places like Waco's Cameron Park for free because hunters have paid for that. It is hunting money that is making these sorts of parks available. Every game species that is hunted in the United States has increased in number. When you hunt bear, interestingly enough, bear populations go up. How does that make sense? The reason why bear populations go up is that hunters will tend to hunt the alpha males. And when the alpha males are unhunted, when they come across a sow and her cubs, they will kill the cubs. If it's not their cubs, they will kill the cubs so that it induces heat in the sow and they can mate with the sow. So when you kill the alpha grizzlies or the alpha brown bear or whatever, those populations go up because the cubs aren't being killed by these jealous males. You're also more likely to be attacked by a predator in an area where hunting is forbidden, like a national park, not only because of the number of predators, but because they've lost their fear of man. Livestock losses to predators cost farmers and ranchers $71 million annually. States that do not allow certain forms of predator hunting, such as cougars, take taxpayers' money to hire professional killers to kill cougars and control the population, when they could be receiving money instead from hunting enthusiasts to achieve the same results. So there are a lot of states like California that boast, oh, we don't have hunters, we're able to control our cougar populations. The lie in that is we're able to control our cougar populations through professional hunters, who are expensive because now they're state employees with a payroll and pension and so on and so forth. They could have achieved the same thing in a more economical way by opening the state to hunting. Deer. I was speaking of predators. Now let's talk about non-predators. Deer kill 10 times as many people in the United States every year than all predators combined. All shark, alligator, bear, cougar attacks, 10 times the amount are killed by deer. They also kill more people each year than all commercial airline accidents, train accidents, and bus accidents combined. Wildlife collisions with aircraft cost $500 million annually. Quality deer management is a boon to the rest of the ecosystem. If you do not control deer populations, there is overbrowsing. The overbrowsing then has a ripple effect on the rest of the ecosystem. There's less grass, the trees get affected because of soil erosion, and the songbirds don't come. So in order to have a healthy ecosystem, deer populations need to be managed responsibly. Hunting is incentive-based environmentalism. It probably does more to preserve animal species on private land than even the Endangered Species Act. In one case, for example, a crucial bill to preserve wetlands in Missouri was ignored by environmental groups, but eventually passed with the help of the NRA. And the reason for this, in part, is that when the EPA declares a land protected because of an endangered species, property values plummet because you can't do anything with the land. When hunters are interested in the land, property values rise, and there's an incentive to keep those lands from turning into strip malls. Vegetarians rely on hunters. Without hunters, damage to crops would rise significantly. Small farmers are particularly hard hit in areas that prohibit hunting. And organic farmers are even more dependent on hunters to keep animal populations in control because they don't have chemical deterrents. And then lastly, last little factoid, in today's world of factory farming and industrial slaughterhouses, it is arguably more ethical to hunt for your food than to shop for it. That's a whole other conversation, but I did find that an interesting thing to ponder. So, based on these statistics, it seems to me that you can certainly argue that hunting is expedient, but that doesn't necessarily answer the question whether hunting is ethical, right? St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas grudgingly argued that prostitution should be legal. It was not because they thought it was a moral activity, but they were making a prudential call that making it illegal would cause greater harm to the political community. And I'm wondering, my question is whether hunting, does that fit in sort of the same category? Yes, we should keep it legal because it has these ecological benefits, but does that make the act itself moral? It's a different question than whether it's ecologically or socially beneficial. And so I'm a theologian by training, so I canvassed the theological tradition. I went first to the Bible. And what I discovered about the Bible is that it has an interesting mixed portrayal of hunters. The very first time that hunting is mentioned is with Nimrod, who is the sort of grandfather of Babylon and is sort of used in the Old Testament as a symbol of tyranny. And he's described as a mighty hunter before the Lord, but there's something ironic about that, before the Lord. And it's actually not, it's actually sort of good exegesis that the word Nimrod in American English has become synonymous with an idiot, a complete imbecile, because Nimrod is just this sort of tyrannical, dumb jock who goes out hunting. So that's not a terribly favorable portrayal of hunting. Neither is the portrayal of Esau as a hunter, right? Esau just sort of comes across as a dumb jock who will sell his birthright for a bowl of pottage. And there actually was a famous quote in the early Middle Ages that was wrongly attributed to St. Jerome, but it still is an interesting thing to ponder. Here's the quote: "Esau was a hunter because he was a sinner. And in the Holy Scriptures, we absolutely do not find someone holy who is a hunter, but we do find holy fishermen." So, Peter, James, and John, like Christ attracts fishermen and gives them the leadership of the church. But, they were tax collectors in Jesus' entourage, but not hunters. So this is the sort of argument. Now, I think there are two factors at play that need to be taken into consideration when assessing the biblical evidence. The first is, what is one of the purposes of the Old Testament? And I believe one of the purposes of the Old Testament is a demythologizing or deconstructing of worldly narratives. I would dare to argue that the Bible is not a myth. It's quite the opposite. It's the exposer of myth. It exposes the unquestioned presuppositions of worldly myth that are actually quite pernicious. When the Hebrew Bible was written, It was at the time, the first books, from what we know, the time of the Babylonian captivity, where the Hebrews are reacting against these imperial myths of Babylon. And you see this with Babylonian myth, Greek myth, Roman myth. What do myths like? They like mighty men. They like warriors. They like proud and great hunters. This is all sort of imperial machismo. And what's fascinating about the Bible is that it brings these characters in and then kind of makes fun of them. You know, there are no great Hebrew warriors. Samson ends up being a flop, right? And David is successful in war, but you know, so there's a deconstructing of types that takes place in the Bible, and it's not necessarily a rejection of the activity per se. It's a rejection of its mythological exaggeration in the minds of sinful men. Right? The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that, especially when you're looking at the whole sweep of the Bible, is what I call a biblical dialectic. Things that are mentioned first in the Bible often get a very negative portrayal. But when you look at the whole sweep of the Bible, you see that the attitude is changing. That's not because God is changing his mind, but first I think he's giving us that cold shower, that demythologizing, and then slowly reintroducing us to a different model. So, for example, drinking wine gets off to a very bad start in the Old Testament with Noah, the first winemaker, who gets rip-roaring drunk and passes out naked. Not a good endorsement of wine. And yet, it is also wine that becomes integral to the Passover. And then, of course, the wedding of Cana and the Last Supper. There is an initial misuse of the thing, but then there's a reuse that becomes more godly as time goes on. The founder of the first city is the first murderer. Cain founds the first city. Political life is not off to a good start when the first city is founded by the first murderer. And yet, Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem, becomes important and good later in the Old Testament. And of course, it becomes a foreshadowing of the heavenly Jerusalem. Heaven is described in the book of Revelation as a polis, right? The heavenly Jerusalem, not a village, the city, right? So there's this misuse and reuse over time. So I was interested in whether hunting underwent a similar pattern, and I did find something, but it's very subtle. In Acts 10, while waiting for dinner to be served, St. Peter, who at the time is under the impression that only good kosher-abiding Jews can become Christians, has a mystical vision in which he sees, quote, all the quadrupeds of the earth and all the creeping things of the earth and all the birds of the air on a giant picnic blanket. And then he hears a voice, and this is, of course, where he learns to accept people and to no longer observe kosher laws as a Christian. But when he hears the voice doesn't say, okay, Peter, you can eat all these things. The voice commands, arise, Peter, kill and eat. Peter first must kill before he eats. Now, lest there be any doubt that the quadrupeds he saw included white-tailed deer and feral hogs, when Peter relays this vision to the brethren in Jerusalem, he elaborates. This is St. Peter. I considered and saw four-footed creatures of the earth and wild beasts and creeping things and fowls of the air. And I heard a voice saying to me, arise, Peter, kill and eat. He explicitly adds the words wild beasts. I was commanded to kill wild beasts. So St. Peter was explicitly commanded by God to arise and kill wild beasts, which presumably can only be done by hunting. So that's the sort of biblical testimony. I can tell you a few more interesting things I learned from patristic and medieval church history, in general, the church fathers were not opposed to hunting. The one thing that they were really opposed to was the hunting that took place in the Colosseum. For one very good reason, a generation earlier, Christians were being thrown to these wild beasts for entertainment. But it was more than just that. As St. Augustine would put it, when you watch a professional beast fighter in the arena killing animals, this is not hunting, it is curiositas. It is this disordered, perverse desire to see blood. And Augustine just rips people in his congregation who are still attached to this form of entertainment. But he does not include hunters who go out into the woods and put them in the same category. As a matter of fact, he often uses hunting as a metaphor for good Christian activities. And he even, I found one Easter Sunday homily that he gave where he calls Christ the ultimate hunter, summus venator, who stalked and killed the lion Death. Now, if he thought hunting was immoral, he wouldn't call Christ the ultimate hunter. In the Middle Ages, I found an interesting distinction. Regarding the laity, the church did not have any opposition to hunting, except for certain times of the year. So hunting was prohibited on Sunday. And the main reason is that the hunters who went hunting skipped Mass. And they didn't like that. So for that reason, they prohibited hunting on Sunday. They discouraged hunting and fasting at the same time. So no hunting during Lent. And the big no-no was absolutely no hunting on Good Friday. Just as a Christian knight was never supposed to bear arms on a Good Friday, a hunter is never supposed to go hunting on Good Friday. And the most famous story of this is, of course, St. Hubert, who was a worldly man, and he was hunting on Good Friday. And he went out into the woods, and he saw this magnificent stag, and he was just ready to take the shot when the stag turns around and he sees a glowing cross between its antlers. And he hears a voice from heaven saying, "Hubert, unless thou changest thy ways, thou shalt surely go to hell." Well, that scared Hubert. Maybe that's some of the primal fear that we were talking about earlier. So he did change his ways and eventually became a holy bishop of Maastricht and went on to become the patron saint of hunters. And his feast day is actually on November 3rd, which corresponds to the opening of deer season, which is not a coincidence. And you may actually be familiar with this image of the antlers of the stag with the cross because it's on the bottle of every bottle of Jägermeister, right? But this is from Baylor, so you wouldn't know about Jägermeister. But exactly. But the Jägermeister means master of the hunt. And the fellow who invented Jägermeister in the 30s was an avid hunter. So that's why he put the symbol of St. Hubert on Jägermeister. Regarding the clergy, the church had a somewhat different attitude. The distinction they made was that those who are clerics should not become addicted to hunting. They may hunt, but they cannot make it an obsession. And overall, the one thing that is absolutely forbidden, and I was reading this in the old book of canon law, I'm like, what the heck is this? What is absolutely forbidden is venatio clamorosa, which literally means in Latin, the noisy hunt. Noisy hunting is absolutely forbidden for clerics because it's not befitting their status as ordained ministers. So it took me a while to figure this out, but what it meant was basically fox hunting or something like that. Not just hunting with the dogs, not like you're just bird dogging that you use the dog to go retrieve the bird, but like the massive aristocratic hunts that involved tons of servants and stalking horses and several different kinds of dogs and hounds. It was this big aristocratic thing. It was very important for the aristocracy because basically it was a martial exercise. The aristocracy went hunting in the Middle Ages to keep their war skills up. So it served an important political and social function. And that's fine for the men who were responsible for defending their homeland, but not for the clergy. So no noisy hunting for the clergy. But this is an old distinction, which actually was dropped in the 1983 Code of Canon Law. So father's okay. So why this attitude, this Christian attitude towards hunting? The underlying rationale that I was able to find is the following. Animals are there for our use, our responsible use, but our use nonetheless. In Christian moral theology, animals do not have rights. There's a very simple reason why animals do not have rights. They do not have duties. In order to have rights, you have to be a moral agent that is responding to a moral obligation. You don't have rights if you don't have duties. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that Christianity has endorsed cruelty to animals. There's been always a consistent ethic against cruelty to animals. But here's the difference. With traditional moral theology, the focus is on the effect that the act has on the agent rather than the object. The best way to think of this is the different way that traditionally two different anti-cruelty to animal groups have framed their arguments. You're all familiar with PETA, which makes an animal rights argument, and in so doing, arguably blurs the line between humans and animals. But what was the first major organization in the United States that reacted against cruelty to animals? The Humane Society. Notice the word animal isn't even in there. Why should we be opposed to cruelty to animals? The answer is it is inhumane. It is beneath our dignity as human beings to engage in an act that demeans us. And so if there is a sadistic element in killing animals, you are degrading you. It is beneath your God-given dignity to behave in a way that is cruel to animals. So you don't need to have an animal rights framework in order to recognize the evil of cruelty to animals. And it's on that note of the effect that hunting has on the agent that I would like to close with. I mentioned the third part would be potential threats to the hunter's soul. So I do believe hunting is an ethical activity. But even ethical activities have potential risks. And so what are some of the risks that I potentially see? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, Father. Hunting, if engaged in excessively or in the wrong spirit, may encourage an indifference to animal suffering, which in turn can lead to an indifference in human suffering. This is at least the argument that St. Thomas More gives in Utopia. When he describes why the utopians don't hunt, it's because they're concerned about the effect that hunting will have on their souls. And as for butchering, the utopians make their slaves do it because they're worried about the effect that it will have on their souls. Now, Thomas More was actually a hunter, so he's not actually he doesn't actually believe what he has written in Utopia. Utopia is a very ironic work for those of you who aren't familiar with it, but he does throw out arguments to make you think. He clearly threw that out there to make us think. Similarly, St. Thomas Aquinas teaches that the purpose of the kosher laws regarding the slaughter of animals is to discourage cruelty to animals. And this is a quote from St. Thomas. For if a man practices a merciful affection for animals, he is all the more disposed to a merciful affection towards his fellow men. People who are sadistic to animals may end up being sadistic to humans as well. in which I think this is an important principle to keep in mind. However, we should also be careful not to overstate the case, for history has shown that not all animal lovers are exemplary humanitarians. As Boreas Sachs writes in his book, Animals in the Third Reich, Pets, Scapegoats, and the Holocaust, for many Nazis, a fondness for animals was tied to an incapacity for friendship with human beings. The Nazis were the Third Reich was the first nation in the 20th century to pass animal rights laws. Hitler showed little or no emotion at the death of his friends, but wept when his canary died. He enjoyed films of people being killed and beaten, but he could not endure depictions of animals being harmed. Himmler, head of the SS, also had, in the words of his doctor, a positively hysterical reaction to hunting. This is a quote from Himmler. "How can you find pleasure in shooting from behind cover at poor creatures browsing on the edge of a wood, innocent, defenseless, and unsuspecting? It's pure murder." In case you don't know, Himmler is the one in charge of the concentration camps. The same guy who sends 6 million Jews to their deaths is freaking out about deer hunting. Indeed, in his diaries, Goebbels states that one of the reasons that Hitler hated Judaism and Christianity was that they differentiated between animal and human life. Number two, so a couple other potential threats to the hunter's soul. Number two, like all other recreational activities, hunting can become a form of escapism. We've already seen the danger of skipping Mass on Sunday, but more fundamentally, there is a danger of neglecting one's other responsibilities. This danger is as old as Xenophon, who in his book defending hunting feels compelled to answer the accusation that hunting keeps men from their domestic affairs. But using hunting to escape is not the disease, but the symptom. Okay? When someone is abusing a sport or pastime in this manner, there is some deeper spiritual or psychological malady that needs to be addressed. Hunting isn't the cause, it's the symptom. Number three, like all other recreational activities, hunting can fall prey to a destructive competitive spirit. And this may be where some forms of trophy hunting come into play. Hunting is usually classified as a recreational rather than a competitive sport, but that does not mean that competition cannot play a role in a hunter's motive. The desire for better and more expensive equipment, bigger trophies, and so forth can be animated by a mimetic rivalry. And this in turn can lead to a number of vices, including envy, avarice, and vanity. A little competition is a good thing, but one way to keep things from getting out of hand, it seems to me, is to think of hunting the way that some people think of golf or tennis. That is to say, it's first and foremost a competition against yourself, not against others, right? You play against your own handicap. It's a lifelong sport against yourself, and that may be a more healthier way of thinking about it. Just a couple of other quick notes, and then I'll end. I also think that potential threats to a hunter's soul can be ameliorated by some counterbalancing forces. The big one is what Father Ted has already mentioned, that experience of the numinous, and so I will not try to elaborate upon that further. I also think that culture is an important factor, that there aren't just individual hunters, there is a hunting culture. And I think fostering a healthy hunting culture is an important part of having ethical and well-balanced hunters. And that is part of the allure of hunting, is the friendship that you form when hunting. But obviously that friendship has to be founded on good principles. So don't just look at hunting, but you want to look at the culture as well. And then the last thing is the element of sportsmanship, right? But as Father has already mentioned, the object of hunting is not killing, but it's engaging nature in a particular way according to honorable rules, right? If the object were just killing, you would just there would be no limits on the number of shells you can have in your shotgun when you're bird hunting. Sportsmanship means that you try to create almost a kind of a level playing field between you and your prey. So this is not just slaughter. There's a certain dance with nature that operates according to certain rules that are important, and I think that also needs to be taken into consideration when we think about the effect that hunting has on the soul. Thank you.